Can I join with the Prime Minister's words of tribute to Alex Salmond and the Holocaust survivor Lily Ebert, and thank him for his kind words about Sir David Amess.
Keir Starmer stood in Parliament facing the nation during Prime Minister's questions when it happened. He got caught in a lie, and the entire room knew it. Rishi Sunak, with the confidence of a man armed with the truth, accused him of halting a vital security measure, a move Starmer instantly denied. But the facts didn't line up, and as the truth unravelled, Starmer's credibility took a hard hit. How many more lies can he tell before the public completely loses trust in him?
Worrying reports that the government may have intervened to stop a visit to the UK by the former Taiwanese president. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the Foreign Secretary will use his meetings in Beijing this week to condemn China's dangerous escalatory acts in the Strait?
The Foreign Influence Registration Scheme is a crucial legislative tool designed to protect the UK from foreign interference, especially from countries like China, Russia and Iran. The scheme essentially requires individuals or entities acting on behalf of foreign governments to register with UK authorities, ensuring transparency and accountability in political influence. MI5, the UK's domestic counterintelligence and security agency, has emphasised how vital this tool is in safeguarding national security. With increasing concerns over foreign states using UK institutions, like universities, as platforms for exerting political and economic influence, this scheme is viewed as essential in curbing such threats. By regulating foreign influence, the UK can maintain the integrity of its democracy and protect its citizens from covert interference.
Given what the Prime Minister said, and I agree, of course we must engage, but we should use that engagement for our national interests. I hope that the Foreign Secretary will unequivocally condemn this military escalation and stand up for democracy in Taiwan.
During Prime Minister's questions, Rishi Sunak accused Keir Starmer of halting the implementation of this very scheme, even though its necessity had been established by the intelligence community. Sunak pointed out that Starmer had, in effect, delayed a security measure that would protect the UK from foreign meddling. Sunak framed this as a direct contradiction to Starmer's past statements, where he promised to prioritise national security. According to Sunak, by halting the scheme, Starmer was not only putting the UK's safety at risk, but also failing to fulfil his commitment to strengthen the country's defences against external threats.
War against Ukraine, supplying the vast majority now of Russia's imported military microelectronics and components, worsening the suffering of the Ukrainian people.
Starmer, however, denied the accusation outright. He insisted that Sunak's claim was inaccurate, stating that no such halt had taken place. His response was swift and confident, asserting that he had always been in favour of empowering the security services and supporting national security measures. Starmer tried to defend himself by reminding everyone of his history as a prosecutor, implying that his experience with intelligence services meant he was more than qualified to know what the UK needed for its safety.
She resigned. The Prime Minister then claimed he was furious at her behaviour and accepted her resignation. Professor Neil Ferguson broke the rules. He also resigned.
Prime Ministers' questions often turn into a battleground, but the exchange between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer during this session was particularly heated. It all started when Sunak confronted Starmer about why he had halted the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, which, as mentioned earlier, was viewed as vital for national security. Sunak, in front of Parliament, reiterated how MI5 and Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee had stressed the importance of the scheme. According to Sunak, failing to implement it put the UK at risk of manipulation by foreign states, especially as British universities were increasingly becoming feeding grounds for Chinese influence. Sunak pressed Starmer hard, questioning his commitment to the safety of the nation and asking why, if he claimed to prioritise security, he would block such a crucial measure.
To the Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I join with the Prime Minister in paying tribute to the Grenfell community? And we're going to rightly discuss that important issue shortly after PMQs.
Starmer's response was firm but defensive. He launched into a narrative about his own experience working with security services as a prosecutor, stating that he knew firsthand how essential intelligence work is. This was an attempt to shore up his credibility and portray himself as someone who fully understands the importance of national security. Starmer also insisted that the scheme had not been halted, directly contradicting Sunak's accusation. He accused Sunak of playing party politics with a serious issue, which, according to Starmer, only weakened the UK's collective defence in the eyes of the world. He tried to turn the tables by suggesting that the real damage was being done by Sunak's politicisation of security, not any supposed inaction on his part.
In public life, will he support mine and my constituents' calls for a public inquiry so that those responsible can finally be held to account?
I thank her for her question because years of underfunding have left councils.
The public response to Keir Starmer's alleged lie during Prime Minister's questions was swift and brutal. Social media platforms lit up with comments, and it became clear that many people were fed up with what they saw as a growing pattern of dishonesty. Starmer's critics seized the moment, with some expressing genuine outrage and others offering sarcastic commentary about his track record. It seemed like this incident only added fuel to an already simmering distrust towards his leadership. One particularly strong reaction came from a user named Lee, who didn't mince words when discussing Starmer's behaviour in Parliament. Lee pointed out that Starmer had lied in Parliament yet again, and voiced concerns about how the Labour leader was expecting the public to ignore the evidence of their own eyes and ears. For Lee, this wasn't just a single incident, but part of a broader pattern of dishonesty that was hugely concerning. It's the kind of sentiment you hear from someone who has been paying close attention and is now completely disillusioned. Then there was Ross, who took a more sarcastic approach to his criticism of Starmer. Referring to Starmer's defence of his history with the security services, Ross mocked the Labour leader's frequent use of the phrase, "I worked with the security services." To Ross, this had become a hollow claim, almost as laughable as when someone constantly brags about their dad being a tool maker in the most unrelated conversations. His sarcasm cut deep, suggesting that Starmer had no real idea of how to keep the country safe, despite all his claims to the contrary. Another user, Andrew, cut straight to the heart of the issue by questioning Starmer's integrity. Andrew noted that Starmer's weak reply of, "It isn't correct," to Sunak's accusation lacked substance and cast doubt on Starmer's credibility. Andrew pointed out that if Starmer's denial had any merit, why hadn't the scheme been implemented yet? His comment questioned Starmer's commitment to his supposed campaign, promises of putting the country before his party, and it resonated with others who shared Andrew's doubts. This online backlash paints a clear picture of growing distrust towards Starmer's leadership. His repeated missteps, particularly when it comes to honesty and security, have made people question whether he's the right person to lead the country. In the court of public opinion, lying is one of the worst offences a politician can commit, and Starmer's denial of halting the foreign influence registration scheme has only deepened the scepticism surrounding him. Media commentators have also joined in, with some highlighting how this incident is indicative of larger issues in Starmer's leadership. All in all, it's safe to say that his credibility has taken a serious hit. The foreign influence registration scheme was designed to be one of the key pillars in the UK's defence against foreign interference, particularly from countries like China, Russia and Iran. Halting its implementation, even temporarily, poses significant risks to national security, and the fact that Starmer allegedly paused it only increases these concerns. MI5 has long warned about the growing influence of foreign states in British institutions, especially universities, which have become prime targets for political influence campaigns. When the leader of the opposition is accused of stalling a vital security measure, it raises the question, how committed is Labour to protecting the UK from these external threats? My5's concerns aren't baseless. Universities in the UK have been seen as feeding grounds for Chinese political influence, according to intelligence reports. Without the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme in place, it becomes much harder to track and mitigate the extent of foreign actors operating within British institutions. The scheme was meant to provide a layer of transparency, ensuring that any individual or entity working on behalf of a foreign state had to register their activities with the government. It's a straightforward idea. If you're working for a foreign power, you should be transparent about it. The failure to implement this scheme leaves a significant gap in the UK's national security strategy.
And kept us all safe. Now, Mr. Speaker, government is about making choices, and the new Prime Minister has made a choice. He has chosen to take the winter fuel allowance away from low-income pensioners and give that money to certain unionised workforces in inflation-busting pay rises.
Keir Starmer's leadership has increasingly been defined by a troubling pattern of perceived dishonesty, and this latest incident only adds fuel to that fire. The accusation that Starmer halted the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, coupled with his immediate denial during the Prime Minister's questions, has put a major spotlight on his integrity. For many, this incident wasn't just about one lie. It's seen as part of a broader issue where Starmer's words don't always align with reality. This is particularly damaging in matters of national security, where trust is paramount. If the public and Parliament can't rely on a leader to be straightforward about such critical issues, then confidence in that leader begins to erode rapidly.
Brand as an open, outward-looking, confident, trading nation. But we've also got to look at regulation across the piece. And where it is needlessly holding back the investment, we need to take our country forward.
This wasn't the first time Starmer has faced accusations of dishonesty. Throughout his tenure, he has been criticised for backtracking on promises and for saying one thing while doing another. Whether it's been about national security, Brexit, or internal Labour policies, the narrative is beginning to stick. Starmer struggles to follow through on his word. The Foreign Influence Registration Scheme scandal feels like a tipping point because it taps into a deeper concern that people have had about him all along. Can we trust him to keep the country safe? His opponents have been quick to point out that this isn't just about one bad moment during Prime Minister's questions. It's about a pattern of behaviour that paints him as inconsistent and unreliable.
The government doesn't have to choose to take money off low-income pensioners in order to give it to highly paid train drivers. That is a choice that he has made, and it will be clear to any pensioners watching.
Public discourse has often highlighted Starmer's flip-flopping on key issues. Take, for instance, his initial stance on Brexit, where he seemed to shift his position based on what was politically expedient. These earlier criticisms may have flown under the radar for some time, but they have now built up to a point where every misstep, like the one involving the security scheme, reinforces a larger narrative of dishonesty. Even within Parliament, fellow MPs have questioned his leadership and commitment to his promises. Each accusation compounds the next, creating a credibility crisis that could undermine his long-term leadership. Starmer's credibility problem is not just about this one moment in Parliament. It's about a mounting sense of mistrust. The more these incidents pile up, the harder it will be for Starmer to convince the public that he's the right person to lead the country, especially when it comes to issues of national security and public trust. Labour's ongoing struggle with the UK's immigration crisis is another key issue that has put the party, and by extension, Keir Starmer, under intense scrutiny. Immigration has been a hot-button topic in the UK for years, and under Labour's leadership, it seems like the problem has only grown more complicated. One of the most pressing issues has been the surge in illegal crossings over the English Channel. Thousands of migrants have made their way into the UK via small boats, and the government's response has been criticised as inefficient and disorganised. For many voters, it feels like Labour's policies aren't doing enough to manage this growing crisis. Starmer's Labour government pledged to end the practice of housing asylum seekers in hotels, a policy that has been widely criticised for being both expensive and ineffective. However, despite their promises, the reality is that the asylum backlog has continued to grow. Processing times have slowed down, and the number of asylum seekers in the UK is higher than ever. Labour's plan to restore order to the system hasn't yet yielded results, and public frustration is mounting. The use of hotels to house migrants has cost British taxpayers millions of pounds each day, which only adds to the criticism Labour is facing. For all of Starmer's promises to streamline the asylum process and clear the backlog, the situation remains far from resolved. The Home Office, alongside security experts, has also voiced concerns about how Labour is handling immigration. Some argue that Labour's approach is too lenient, lacking the firmness needed to tackle the issue head-on. Critics point out that Labour's policies may have unintentionally encouraged more illegal crossings, as traffickers and migrants alike perceive the government as incapable of enforcing strict immigration laws. Security experts have further warned that the immigration crisis isn't just a logistical problem. It's also a potential security risk. Unregulated migration opens the door to foreign influence and organised crime, exacerbating the existing threats to national security.